welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is December the 14th. We're in the book of Acts, chapter 28, and we're going to look at the first 10 verses there.
And if you're scared of snakes, just turn it off the podcast.
Yeah. I said something a few years back about snakes in a sermon. I'm not a snake fan. And when I got home from church that day, somebody in the church had gone and bought all of the rubber snakes that they had at the Dollar General, and they had put them all over my porch. It was when I first pulled up, I was like, crap.
It should have just been one, because that would have been more realistic.
Somebody actually brought me one because I preached on this in passage. I preached a Sunday morning, and we were still doing Sunday night services. And Sunday night, somebody handed me, they said, someone dropped this off for you, wanted you to have this. And it was a little container that was covered. And I pulled the cover back, and there was a little green garden snake in there. And I didn't appreciate it. I'm not a snake person. I'm just like, I still get to identify the culprit.
So a little background here. Paul's a prisoner. He's appeared before a couple of different groups. He's being transported to Rome, I believe, and by boat. He was in a ship. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in the ship, said, tell the people if they stay with the ship, they'll be safe. They did, and they all arrived safely on the shore of Malta. Have you ever been to Malta?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay, I have too.
Yep.
And, it's you can, yeah, anyway, so just off the coast of Italy.
Yes, pretty.
Yeah. So they've been shipwrecked here. They were saved. The ship was saved because Paul was on board. Am I right?
The ship itself, the people
were saved because Paul was one of the people.
Yeah, without looking back, I think it was like 278 total on the prisoners and crew.
And just in the context of that, sometimes having the right people around saves you.
No doubt. Yeah.
And anyway, so they're on the shore, and it says this: once we were safe on shore, we learned that we were on the island of Malta. The people of the island were very kind to us. It was cold and rainy, so they built a fire on the shore to welcome us. Well, let's just stop right there. It seems the people of Malta were not shocked that a shipwreck had happened. Apparently, it's just another ship. Yeah. Another bunch of people. But they welcomed them. They were very kind to them. How can we be better at welcoming others into our lives that have experienced a wreck for themselves? Because you're in a better position than they are. How can we be better at that?
Well, I think some of the practical lessons are literally what we are reading. There was an opportunity presented. And sometimes it's just when the opportunity presents itself, that's the time to respond to that. And then it was just practical application. It was cold and rainy, so they built a fire. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. There's an opportunity. Here's a practical response. Just do it.
And I think it's easier to welcome people from their shipwreck when they see they have a need and they're ready to accept the help. If they've been like, no, we're good, we don't need it, and not ready to accept that help, it could have become a very contentious situation. Right. So I think
then float back out to sea.
Right. Yeah. And so I think those are the situations where it gets really hard, when the people who are shipwrecked are like not wanting your help.
I'm not really shipwrecked.
Right.
Yeah. I would agree with that 100%, that if you want help, I am typically readily available to try to help you. Now, the way I help may be different than the way one of you help, but but if you clearly have wrecked, and I approach you and you say, "No, I ain't wrecked. I'm fine,"
and move on.
Yeah, I mean, I told a story. It's been about a year ago. It was the Sunday after Christmas last year. I told a story when I got back to church in the sermon. This guy missed his exit and decided for 40 and 85 split there near Hillsborough. He went on 85 and realized it and turned, and he came through this giant ravine and came out the other side and, just beat his car all up. And I stopped to help. And I don't always stop to help in those situations. I just don't. I have no problem keeping on riding. But I did. I stopped and went over to where he was at. Car was ripped all up. The front fender was bent all the way around by his door to the point he couldn't open it. And he rolled the window down, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, "Do you need me to call a wrecker?" He said, "No, I think I can make it from here." I was like, "Dude, you need to get out and look at this car. You got a tire busted. You got a front, like everything's just tore all to pieces." But in his mind, like even when he got out, I said, "Do you need me to call anybody?" "No, I'll be fine." And in his mind, he was in denial. Most likely, he had been taking something. That's what I would guess. He wasn't drunk, but he probably was under the influence of something. And I do think you're right. When people say, "No, I'm fine, I ain't wrecked," those are hard people to help. Mm-hmm. Very hard. It says, Paul gathered an armful of sticks and was laying them on the fire. A poisonous snake, driven out by the heat, bit him on the hand. The people of the island saw it hanging from his hand and said to each other, "A murderer, no doubt. Though he escaped the sea, justice will not permit him to live." I have a couple of questions here. I don't even know why I wrote this question. I think we've already talked about it. How do you, Alyssa didn't answer, how do you respond to snakes?
I've had one snake inside of my house.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And that, it was in...
And you still, I'm going to give you props that you still live there. Because my wife would not. We would have moved, the house would have got burned to the ground.
And that's different tax brackets.
That's funny.
Because the snake was in the bathroom in the middle of the night. It was when I had an infant and was up, multiple times in the night. So I go in, and luckily I had my phone flashlight on, and I see a snake slithering there. Mm. And I go and I tell Tyler there's a snake in the bathroom. He doesn't believe me. He thinks I just am delusional, but he goes in there and it's there. So he has to kill the snake because he was mad. And then some very kind person after I posted about that on Facebook was like, "Well, this is the season where snakes are having babies, so look for babies." And so I did not use that bathroom.
Let me just say this about tax brackets. My wife has no clue what tax bracket we're in. She would just burn the house down and say, "Here, you figure it out, Mizell." That's what would happen in my house. She would just be like, "You on your own. I don't really care whether you can afford it or not."
Y'all ever been bit by a snake?
I have not. Have you?
I have, in the face. Ooh. That's why I have such an aversion to them.
How old were you?
Probably maybe 5. I was at my grandmother's house, and I wanted peanut butter, and I had a jar at Grandma's house that I ate directly out of. And she said, "Sure, baby, go get you a spoon." And I went to the drawer, and I was just like head level, so I had to tiptoe to look into to get the spoon.
I want to say some bad words right now.
I'm just telling you a true story. And when I pulled that drawer back and I went like that, there was about a 4-foot chicken snake somehow had gotten in her house, gotten in that utensil drawer. And as I pulled it back, that coiled back. And when I did like that, unleashed all its power, popped me right there. Wow. And it hit so hard that it bruised, but the bacteria from the bite, my face just ballooned. I mean, in a matter of minutes. And so, snakes and I ever since, wow. we don't get along.
Yeah, so, I guess not. But the people here are, everything is a sign. Mm-hmm. I have an aversion to avoiding signs myself. Sometimes I wish I was more, I saw more signs, more God winks, whatever people want to call them. I said on another podcast, I know some folks whose God has got something in his eye. He goes,
he ain't batting them all the time.
but
let them have their joy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they're like this though. It's just you can't keep up with them. That's a different story. God forgive me for that. Anyhow, should why was everything to them a sign? And should we look more through that lens of signs? Should my reprobate self be more open to signs?
Well, what they interpreted as a sign was an assumption. It wasn't a sign at all. It was just an assumption. I think that's the danger, that assumptions we make signs out of sometimes, and sometimes we actually miss signs that are legitimate signs, and we can confuse the two. There have been times when I felt like I genuinely saw a sign, as it were, but I'm not one of those people who I see it every day, everywhere I turn. It's this or that. I don't typically view the world that way.
Yeah, I think if the sign is, oh wow, God loves me, God sees me in this situation, and is, that's one thing. If the sign is, oh, I need to start a new career every 5 minutes, or I need to go do this, I think then that's where it starts to really get problematic. And I mean,
to me, it's almost a compounding factor here. There's a shipwreck, and at first they're just like, oh, poor things had bad luck, bad weather, shipwreck, here they are. Shipwreck now, this guy gets bit by this poisonous snake. There's got to be more to this. And so they just extrapolate that out and come to that conclusion because this poisonous snake is going to be judgment.
It is interesting that I had not thought about this until you started talking, that they must have known he was a prisoner. I don't know how many other prisoners were on the boat. My recollection is it was a ship of commerce. Am I correct? Do y'all recall?
Yeah, I think it was both. They were carrying prisoners, but it was a ship of commerce as well. 276 total.
But they were open to people. They didn't want to lock up the prisoners just because they had been in jail somewhere else. They were pretty open to them, which is, when you think about it,
pretty generous.
Yeah, extremely generous. Verse 5 says, but Paul shook the snake off into the fire and was unharmed. The people waited for him to swell up or suddenly drop dead. I'm gonna speak to this. But when they had waited a long time and saw that he wasn't harmed, they changed their minds and decided he was a god. How does our response to trouble affect others' view of us? And do we find ourselves just waiting on the other shoe to drop in people's lives sometimes?
I've waited for a few shoes to drop in my day, I think, and it's not something that's good, but you see, they think that he's made a choice to be a murderer, and then all of this is happening, and it's going to, I don't know.
Well, one part of your question, there's a significant impact or influence that we have on other people, how we respond to crisis, whatever it is. And I do think people look at us, and I know I have looked at other people sometimes in situations, circumstances, and you just kind of wait and you're like, okay, this is the first step of a progressive thing, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And they made this conclusion, already predetermined. He's got to be a murderer. He got bit by the snake. He shook it off. And so just give it enough time, and we're going to see his demise. And I think, unfortunately, we do that with other people sometimes. We just step back and say, just wait for the demise,
Yeah, there's a couple of things I would say about this. One, Paul's response was he shook the snake off. He didn't go around and say, look, I got a snake.
Yeah.
See my snake?
Yeah, nothing's going to happen to me.
That's right. Well, he didn't, he wasn't arrogant about it. He said, this has got to go.
Yeah,
it was immediate. Okay, this has attached itself to me. I need to unattach it. And I think one of the mistakes that people make sometimes is that things attach themselves to their life, and they want to go around and show everybody that this has attached itself to me, believing that they can overcome it, and they can't. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, he got bit by the snake because he was contributing to the work that needed to be done. He wasn't content, even though he's the apostle, he wasn't content letting everybody else do the work once they got there and they'd already started the fire. He saw a need, was doing a practical thing, and he got bit in the process of doing good work.
Yeah.
And like you said, it just attached. And so the reaction was, let's get rid of this thing as quick as possible. It's not a badge of honor. It's not.
The second thing is he should have died. He should have died. Let's just be straight.
Well, when I was reading about this passage, it says present-day Malta doesn't have any poisonous snakes, and so they don't know.
That was the last one. He shook it into fire.
But they say it was a poisonous snake. Yeah. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know.
They don't say it's a poisonous snake. They do expect him to swell up and die, but it doesn't. I guess a poisonous snake. It does say that.
Yeah, it says when it sticks, it was laying them on the fire. Poisonous snake driven out.
I mean, maybe there were poisonous snakes and they've gone extinct.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I mean, it's because of the island, that wouldn't be hard to,
for them to die.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or kill them out.
But what I would say is, if let's take the story as the way it's written, it was a poisonous snake. They expected him to die. He should have died,
or at least shown ill effect from it.
This is where we get in traps. And this is where sometimes I don't understand. I'll be honest with you, I don't understand. Why? There are times in life I'll see people be bit by a snake and they do swell up and they do die.
Yeah.
And I see other people in the same exact situation or very similar and almost unscathed.
Yeah.
They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that part of faith. I don't. Because I want to be able to tell people, if you get bit, you're going to die. I know a situation where somebody right this minute has received something they did not deserve, like just a straight grace gift from God. And I don't even know if they recognize it. And other people in similar situations have suffered great harm. And I wish I could explain it, because I think it creates lots of tension for us.
Sure it does.
It's
one of those things we don't
expect
know.
that other shoe to drop and it don't.
Yeah.
And they never get what we feel like should be coming to them. Because what I want to say, there's just a lot of things. I mean, this is a really preachable passage from a preacher standpoint. One of the things I would say about Paul is, had he paid attention to what he was doing, he could have avoided this altogether. He wouldn't have picked up a snake in his pile of sticks, And
Jay wouldn't have been craving peanut butter. He wouldn't have got bit by a snake.
If he had just stuck his finger in the jar, it was his anyway. If I got a spoon, he would have been fine.
It's my fault.
Look, that's in that situation. When you got bit by a snake, there would be no reason, I don't think, unless your granny just kept snakes in the drawers. There would have been no reason to expect a snake in the drawer. Okay, but there are some situations we find ourselves in that we should be more careful, because the possibility of danger is there. If you're in the middle of the winter, which they are, that's why they weren't supposed to travel. That's why they shipwreck. They show up on the shore. There should be an expectation that there are going to be dormant snakes laying around that you might pick up by accident, that you didn't know were there. There should be that expectation. You're not going in a drawer expecting a snake. And I think that's the difference. I think there are people who are living a good life, bad things happen to, and there would be no way to see it.
Yeah.
There are other people, though, that they're doing stupid stuff, and they get away with it, and you expect them to have been. You don't got anything else you want to add? I got one last question. Last part of it says, near the shore where we landed was an estate belonging to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us and treated us kindly for 3 days. As it happened, Publius's father was ill with fever and dysentery. Paul went in and prayed for him, and laying his hands on him, he healed him. Then all the other sick people on the island came and were healed. As a result, we were showered with honors, and when the time came to sail, people supplied us with everything we would need for the trip. So it seems that Publius shows kindness to Paul. Mm-hmm. Paul, in return, prays for his father, and he's healed. And then suddenly everybody else. So how do our actions toward one person affect, or how does that draw other people to us?
I'd say we never really know how far our actions can ripple out. And the good that we do can spur someone on. I think of just the idea of like the pay it forward at a drive-thru where somebody pays for a cup of coffee, and then it starts a spiral of just people being generous. And we a lot of times we can't control that, but we can just do good and know that we aren't always going to see the ripple effects, but they will happen.
Yeah, it just kept going full circle again and again and again and again. And really the actions, because he obviously set the example to begin with, and because he was kind and generous to them, the people were at ease responding to that. And then it came back full circle to many of them on the island who were sick and struggling, including the official's dad.
Yeah, and the one last thing I would say is don't ever believe that bad things happening in your life cannot be meant for good, because clearly this shipwreck turns into a blessing for this entire island.
Sure.
People are healed, set free, and that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think that the challenge is in the midst of the shipwreck and the struggles is to look for the opportunities to do good and be good, because ultimately it can come back. I believe it will come back to you in some form or fashion.
Alyssa, will you close us in prayer?
Lord, we thank you for the book of Acts and for the stories that we've read of your church growing and expanding and the good that was done there. I thank you for the example that Paul has set for us and for the lessons we can learn from his life. I pray that you will help us to do good things, and to, even when we don't see the ripple effects, even when we don't see the good it expands to, Lord, that you will help us to continue and not grow weary in doing good. In Jesus' name, amen.